U.S. producer inflation was unchanged in June. In the 12 months through June, the producer price index increased 2.3% after advancing 2.7% in May. Core PPI, excluding food, energy, and trade services, was also flat in June. It is up 2.5% over the past year. Joining us now to discuss is Daniel Lacalle, chief economist at Tresses and author of the book Freedom or Equality. Good afternoon, Daniel. Thanks for coming on again this week. So what do you make of this month's PPI report? Can you break it down for us?
Well, thank you very much, Don. I think that the PPI report is exceedingly important because it shows that there is absolutely zero level of inflationary pressure coming from imports. And it shows that producers are actually keeping prices very, very stable. It's not just energy, but it's also in everything that has to do with manufacturing and services. So all of those elements are very important because they are leading indicators of what is likely to happen in the next months with CPI, the consumer price inflation that we watch monthly. Also very important is the reading coming from the Trueflation website, which documents the day-by-day changes in the measure of inflation, the way that the Bureau of Labor and Economics shows, no? And it's at 1.7%, i.e. very much below the levels that the Fed is looking at. So all of those elements, if we put them all together, show that the inflationary pressures are very limited and that tariffs are not generating any kind of inflationary pressures.
Well, that sounds like good news. But I have to ask you, has the full effect of tariffs been accounted for in the data that you mentioned?
Well, I think it's very important to understand that for months we have heard economists and experts say that the inflationary pressure of tariffs would have been created immediately because they were saying that producers would front run those tariffs. So obviously that is not happening. Even if we look at it from a long-term perspective, inflation expectations are actually coming down. So I don't think that we should be concerned about the impact of tariffs. And in any case, from a purely economical perspective, understanding true economics, tariffs do not cause inflation. Tariffs don't mean more units of currency in the system, and tariffs don't generate higher levels of velocity of money. So if velocity of money is not rising and there's no more printing currency, then there is no risk of inflation.
Okay, I think you're the perfect person to ask this. Can you give us your analysis on yesterday's CPI report, where some outlets are saying that price increases are due to tariffs?
Oh, it makes absolutely no sense. If you look at the components, the only thing that made the CPI be slightly higher than the previous month was energy, which is volatile and has absolutely nothing to do with tariffs because it's reflecting the small bounce in energy prices that we saw due to the Iran attack. But everything else, if you look at core CPI, if you look at every single component, showed that there is no significant inflationary pressure. In fact, those people that are saying right now that that CPI figure was due to tariffs will be very, very in a very difficult position in July when the energy component, if we watch at what is going on with oil prices and with gas prices, is likely to be significantly down.
Would you say the CPI from yesterday and the PPI today sort of are two pieces of the same puzzle, or is there a disconnect between those two data points?
No, they're two pieces from the same puzzle, and they show why the Federal Reserve is wrong. The Federal Reserve said that they were going to be data dependent, and they're obviously not being data dependent. They're falling into the trap of an ideological view about tariffs. You may want to criticize tariffs from numerous perspectives, but there's certainly no reason to say that tariffs are inflationary. If tariffs were inflationary, China or the European Union would have hyperinflation.
Okay, so let's talk about the latest tariff actions by President Trump. The administration is working to address trade imbalances, with a group of 15 top trading partners, and has already put tariffs on a number of countries. What are your thoughts on that? Are tariffs a sustainable, and the key word is sustainable, tool for revenue generation?
No, I don't think it's a tool for revenue generation. I think it's a tool to negotiate better trading terms. However, if, as we are seeing with a number of countries, those countries decide that they don't want to lift their non-tariff barriers and their tariff barriers, then obviously they will pay those tariffs. So it's an important geopolitical tool that has significant ramifications that go beyond trade. They also go into monetary and political inclinations of many countries and the policies implemented by those countries in order to maintain a certain level of political control of trade. So if we look at it from that perspective, there's plenty of opportunities to readdress these trade negotiations. I think that there will be quite a few that will be signed in the next couple of weeks. But what is also evident is that it seems that there are a number of governments that don't want to lift their trade barriers. And it's, for me, pretty evident, for example, in Brazil. Therefore, it is logical that those countries have likely decided that they will be happy with tariffs, just as, for example, China did.
So in addition to a negotiation tool, are there other impacts of tariffs? Can tariffs encourage, supply chain reshoring, for example, or diversification? Your thoughts on that?
Well, it's pretty obvious that distributors and consumers and also industries all over the world have been preparing themselves to address supply chain challenges. So much that if we look at the supply chain challenge index, it's showing that there is very little in terms of pressure in the supply chain index. No, so I think that that is an important factor. Is that if there's anything that we've learned out of this, is that companies can very, very quickly adapt to a changing environment and readdress their difficulties with their suppliers. And for example, I think that it's pretty obvious that a lot of US importers have diversified their supply chains, have also improved their supplier base, and they're also working with customers to address these challenges and to get the best possible prices for their customers.
And Daniel, you've probably already heard that President Trump said he will impose very severe secondary tariffs on Russia if Putin does not agree to a ceasefire in 50 days. What do you think would be the impact of these 100% secondary tariffs?
It's very, very significant. It's very significant because we need to understand, again, this is another example of how the Trump administration is using tariffs, not just from a trade perspective, but also from a geopolitical perspective. And it's very significant because for Russia, which is a country that has very elevated inflation and significant economic problems, this can be a huge burden that could definitely make its economy a lot weaker, and with it also the economy of China, because you have to remember that a lot of those tariffs would be immediately impacting the goods that are there, therefore exported to China by Russia.
Okay, just one more question for you, Daniel. Do you think these tariffs, could push China, India, and other BRICS nations closer together in opposition to the U.S.? Is there a risk there?
There is a risk, but if there's anything that they have proven is that it's a very limited risk with very weak real importance, because the question that anybody that is watching us today needs to answer is the following: who would want a currency issued by Brazil, Russia, India, and South Africa? And the answer is Nobody. So it's very, very difficult for many people to understand that you don't have a world reserve currency just because you get together in a summit. The only way in which you can have a world reserve currency is if you have independent institutions, if you have investor security and legal security. And that is a challenge in many of those nations.
Well, Daniel, well said as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Next, Israel.